Come in, pick your poison and have a seat as we continue our ATT Spooktober Spectacular. This week we've lined up a terrifying tale from Tennessee. In a quiet little town right in the middle of the Bible Belt, it is the last place you might think to find a series of demonic developments. A family was said to have run afoul of more than a few phantoms and experienced years of sinister supernatural suffering. The main spirit seemed to have it out for the family patriarch, especially, but almost the entire family seemed to suffer from this curse. The entire tale would culminate in a deadly encounter with what seemed to be a case of paranormal poisoning. This case file joined the Fearists as they spend some time on the frightening farm where a president met a poltergeist in the Bell Witch.
Welcome to Alien Theorist Theorizing, Case File 254, another spectacular Spooktober episode. I'm Braden.
I'm Dan. And I'm Andrew.
Andrew, buddy, it's your pick.
I'm up to play it here, boys.
Yeah, you have to play what you want to do, Spooktober.
All right. This one's a special one, boys. For my installment of Spooktober, I'm going to start with Season 3, Episode 10. The Trickning. So now this is the 59th episode of DuckTales, which premiered on October 5th, 2020.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
So it's Halloween night as Huey, Dewey, and Louie and Webby get ready to go out and collect candy. Now, Scrooge says that they have to leave the mansion as he never hands out candy. Instead, He leaves an empty bowl that says take one on it, implying for the treaters that to take one so you run out of candy.
Fucking genius.
It's genius.
Yeah,
that's guy
really,
didn't, guy didn't get rich on fucking
That's
mistake,
true,
boys.
you know?
Right? Start with a nickel. Shine and Shoes got a nickel. So Scrooge told them all to hell out, get candy for themselves.
And for those of you, if you're falling behind, this is the new, the new age Duckburg. This isn't the old DuckTales. This is new DuckTales.
Well, this is the fucking the reboot, basically.
Yeah,
Current
season
iteration.
3 of the reboot. Yeah,
Believe it or not, because that
October 5th, 2020.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah. So, anyways, he implies for the trick or treaters to take one, but there's nothing left. Genius. So Scrooge, of course, decides to head out and collect candy on his own. Right? Why not? Probably going to resell them. Let's be honest here. Which obviously kind of annoys Donald and Della. Do you guys know who Della is yet? You aware?
Yeah. We talked about Della, I think, on the last DuckTales.
Yeah, who's Della?
The sister.
Whose sister?
Scrooge's sister. Is it Donald's sister?
Donald's sister.
Oh, shit.
Close. You were close. You're better than, I was better than that. But Della's further annoyed when Donald tells her that they will head over to Launchpad's house instead, as she wanted to scare trick-or-treaters and thinks Launchpad's house is too soft. Della's a big Halloween girl.
Yeah. Thanks, Launchpad's house is too soft.
It's too soft for Halloween. She's not into it.
You see that waddle? We know she's a big Halloween girl.
Huge Halloween girl. So despite Huey's intricate planning on where to go for the night, Louie insists that they head to Hazel's house instead, a haunted house that rests outside Duckburg. Louie believes that it holds a lifetime supply of candy so that they will not have to trick or treat ever again.
What implies that that it holds a
Well, Dan is
lifetime.
Dan is probably a gated community, so they're handing out full-size chocolate bars.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
no, that's
Yeah.
big. And they're probably
Holds
tightly
up, right?
packed, right? Tightly packed because you want to hit the most amount of houses real quick, right? You don't want these big acre plots where your neighbors are separated by, big fence yards. You want cookie cutter, boom, 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 boom. You want to be able to go from door, cut across a driveway in a little front yard to another door.
You
Right?
want to get
It's all about maximum
you want the
candy
like
efficiency.
townhouses, like the nicely appointed townhouses that
Exactly.
are right next to each other. Yeah. Okay. maximum
Duplexes,
efficiency.
you got
it.
dude. The best would be like if you got some sort of quadplex complex. You just like boom, 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 boom. Like think about the loadout you could get from a place like that.
And like you go down one of those like fucking, the what do you call it, cul-de-sacs, and you just ping pong. Bang, bang,
Oh, yeah.
bang, 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 right?
Buddy, you
have
switch
different-
costumes.
Boys, exactly. At the end of
Right?
the fucking Caldy, switch costumes, hit them all again.
Bang,
Nobody
boom,
knows.
boom, 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 boom.
Nobody fucking knows.
Oh man, like I said, it's trick or treating. There's a little bit of an art form to it,
Absolutely.
and if you're not trying to maximize, listen. The cards, it's like the house always wins. Big candy always wins, right? So if you're not trying to do whatever you can, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying on Halloween because you need to maximize your candy that you pick up, or else big candy wins.
Right. Because of
Right?
shrinkflation. Like
I don't like to think of
they're
it as-
giving you less candy, therefore
Now,
you
see,
need
I don't
get
like to think
more
of it as
candy.
tricking. Or cheating, sorry. I'd like to think of it as
Tricking, yeah, that's 100%.
tricking.
You're
You're not
right.
cheating,
You're right.
you're tricking.
It's right in the name. You're tricking.
Well,
and that's fine.
if they're less treating, then you have to balance the equation
Yes.
by the tricking. Yeah.
You got to up
It's
the
all
tricking.
fucking math.
It is all math, right? The
Right.
scales
The
in order to
universe is
be
math. Everything in the
Y
universe
equals
is math.
MC squared or whatever,
right?
right?
Exactly.
and too many years. But you know who's going to really profit now? This is a problem. What I'm starting to see is no matter where you go, there's always something that kind of pulls. So now, we start to even it out with big candy because, the treating's getting lower. So we start tricking. But in order to be tricking more, obviously who's going to profit from that? Big costume.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I got hit hard by big costume this year, boys.
Yeah.
$45 for a 3-year-old's costume.
Yeah, it's insane. And now you gotta buy 2-3 costumes, right? To make sure you're getting the adequate tricking to fight big candies less treating.
Well, let's be honest. Kid's going to be fucking tired 3 houses in. I'll be carrying them.
Well, you just slip into the costume, finish up the round for him. Eh?
Probably, yeah. That's the plan.
Is that a good conversation? I think we could wrap this one up. Nice pulling this. That is because, of course, case file 254, we're going to be talking the Bell Witch. Many people say that, and by the way, we're back across the pond. No, we're back from the pond. We came back. We were way across the pond for a while. We're back. We've come back. And people say this is the greatest American haunting. I don't know if it was the scariest because I was like,
it's the one of the most well documented cases.
I mean, fuck, this had everything. Witch hunters, presidents.
That's what they claim anyway.
Ex-presidents, daughters, grifters, husbands. Everyone was
How is it
affected.
every case file? It's the spookiest castle. It's the scariest event. It's just, I swear to God.
Because
Well,
they're all
I
the
mean-
spookiest.
I mean, if you start to narrow down your vision, right?
What are
If
you
start
talking about? We've never said anything was the spookiest. We've never
Boys, you
said
can
that.
only,
We've
there
never
can only
said
be
that.
so many world's biggest balls of yarn,
We've never said that.
you know?
Well,
Like, how many
yeah,
times have you seen it?
see, this is where you're failing to miss. It's like if
I'm
whatever
failing to miss, so I'm hitting.
No, yeah. If you fail, yeah. So if let's say, for instance, Kamloops has the biggest ball of yarn. Well, maybe over where I am in Campbell River, we have the biggest ball of yarn this side of the Pacific. Right? It's like it's just how you scope at it, right? So it's like when they say this, right? They're looking at it through different scopes, right? So it's like, but
You're both
again-
on the same side of the Pacific.
but I just want to say,
Tomato, Dan.
this,
Yeah.
as what we like to do in these case files and stuff is we like to start to pick those loose connections together, right? And you're going to really quickly learn as we start to talk about this case file,
If
that-
we ever start.
this in fact falls, right in Craig's triangle, the Dragon's triangle.
Yes.
So I just want to keep that in mind when you're listening.
It's a big triangle.
It's in there.
So this case comes from good old the volunteer state of Tennessee, on a farm.
Hold on. Why do they call it the volunteer state?
It's called the volunteer. It's called the volunteer state.
Everything I read about this case, well, it could have been called the slave state.
Yeah, but I mean that's
now we're calling them volunteers.
Their football team. Well, it's the name of their football team.
One of their football teams, I suppose. Yeah. The Volunteers. Yeah. I mean, they're volunteers. I suppose it could have been probably from Civil. I mean, it probably was Civil War.
Yeah. Wow. That is some good PR sidestepping.
It's a good spin.
They're volunteers.
They're volunteering.
So on a farm,
they're free to go anytime they want.
Just not today.
Yeah.
For like a couple hundred years. So on a farm in Robertson County, Tennessee, in the early 19th century, you had one John Bell, who was formerly of North Carolina and was living with his family. Now, John Bell had married while he was still in North Carolina, he had married into an affluent or a pretty successful farming family. He married one of the daughters from the family named Lucy, so Lucy Bell. And so when they moved to Robertson County, Tennessee, the family consisted of him, his wife Lucy, and then they had 4 sons at the time, I believe. And then after they moved there, they had about 2 or 3 more kids. They had a lot. So in total,
who's going to work the land other than the volunteers?
Jesse, John, Junior, Drury, Benjamin, Esther, Zadok, Elizabeth. My question is, like, you had your John, and then you had the next kid, and you're like, fuck, we already got John. What are we going to name him? Drury? Like, what the fuck is Drury? I've never heard that name before. You have Dick Williams, and then you have Joel Egbert. I'm like, why not just Joel? Why do you have to give him 2 names, Joel Egbert?
Because he's so smart. They wanted to call him fucking Egbert.
Big old egghead. Let's call him Egbert.
You never heard the name Jury, but you've heard the name Zadok.
Never heard Zadok either. The guy sounds like he's fucking got about 20 sister wives though. With that.
Yeah,
and just to point out to everyone very quickly, if you're thinking and you were wondering, John Bell and his family were, in fact, volunteer owners.
Yeah, absolutely.
They own a ton of volunteers.
I think it's important to note that one of the stories I was reading said that they actually had to leave due to the fact that they considered his lands cursed back in North Carolina. Like, basically cattle dying at rapid rates. They weren't able to fucking get any of their crops growing or anything like that, which I thought was super weird.
So they ended up, but he did have a good chunk of change, and he used that change to go ahead and purchase a pretty much a wide swath of land over in Robertson County, Tennessee, which at the time was, I think, Red River, the area of the Red River.
Yeah, boy, spooky already, Red River.
Yeah.
Come on.
But, the move was good, apparently, because he became one of the area's most successful planters. And John Bell was actually named an elder for the Red River Baptist Church that had been there since, 1791, I believe, is when the church was established, and had been there for quite a while. So he became a pretty influential and visible part of the community there at Red River. Now, in the summer of 1817, you had the first appearance of these unusual disturbances that started surrounding the Bell family. And the very first occurrence is usually cited to be an incident on the farm where John Bell sighted some type of creature within the corn rows of the family farm, and he fired at this creature, which he described having a dog's body with a rabbit head of some type, like this some kind of chimerical creature.
Do they not have fucking basset hounds in North Carolina? Like, is he that shocked to see fucking?
It was a dark black color. I mean, maybe just like the coloring, maybe it threw him off, but it was something that he had never seen before. It was something that threw him into a bit of threw him for a loop. But he fired at this thing thinking it was some kind of I don't know, unusual creature that was just something he'd never seen before. And he took a shot at it and it vanished.
I don't know what it is, but kill it.
It's funny to hear the story of because I did read it where it's like, this is the first unusual disturbance. But then when I was kind of doing some other research, there was actually like some of the slaves that he owned were actually reporting stuff earlier, and it seemed to be progressing. And what they were saying is like they were hearing like whispers in the woods at night, and they were like, what the hell? What's that? What's going on? And then they would see ghost candles where it looked like someone was holding candle lights, and then they would get more, and it looked like they would approach to the property line, and then they would just stop. Right. And so this was getting reported, and, you know, obviously, John Bell, you know, he didn't really like what they were telling him. Just get back to work, basically. You know, enough of this tomfoolery.
Get back to volunteering.
Get back to volunteering. Or else I'll volunteer my whip on you or something like that. And so these things were getting reported by, you know, the slaves that he owned. They were saying that like weird stuff was happening. They were feeling, you know, a weird presence and stuff. And this was starting to it seems like it was creeping from the outside of the properties, and then it started to work it in. And as the lights were kind of started to be seen more and more, that's when I read that John then he now sees something. So this had been kind of like, you know, he'd been hearing this, something going on, and now he's seeing something.
Yeah, and so they weren't the only ones to see anything. Like shortly after the encounter with the dog rabbit thing.
Why did you guys think that maybe what's that cryptid, a jackalope? That's kind of what I was thinking it might be, because it was described as like a dog with the head of a rabbit.
Well, I was like, a jackalope would have like antlers. It'd be like
that's right.
rabbit,
that's right.
So. The other members of the family saw something as well. So you had his son Drury and Elizabeth, who was known as Betsy, and we'll probably refer to her as Betsy from here on. And they also began to see strange creatures near the property as well. Drury is reported to have seen some type of bird of extraordinary size, some large bird. And Betsy said that she spotted a girl with a green dress swinging from the limb of an oak tree on the property.
Now, the account I read when it says swinging, unfortunately, it was from what I saw, it was swinging from a noose that was wrapped around its neck.
Yeah, I read one of that too. What I read wasn't swinging in a swing. She was swinging all right though.
Yeah. And there was like tears coming down her eyes, and like the significance, I guess the green of the dress was so vivid. And I guess a lot of times the devil is always associated with color green. And there's such thing as the devil's wench, which is a similar, like a specter to this.
And so in the evening after, immediately after John Bell had seen this dog-like creature, the family would start experiencing a number of strange occurrences at the house, their cabin that they had on the property itself. So while John and his family were actually sitting down to dinner, they started to hear a lot of strange noises on the outside of the cabin. They described sounds of like chains rattling, dragging along the boards on the outside porch.
Jacob Marley.
They heard this, scratching, banging, and even at one point, like John Bell and a couple of his sons were reported to actually go out and try to catch whoever was doing this. They thought it was some type of prank or some type of joke, or somebody was out there doing this. But when they got out there, nobody was to be seen.
And again, this isn't like this all happened one night. This is continuous to the point where these things, it's kind of building. Like they're hearing the bangs, and then it's banging throughout the night. Then it's the scratching, and then it's more persistent. So, over the course of a couple of nights. So now they're going out to be like, someone's doing this. Obviously, someone's fucking with us. We got to go check this, and nothing. Right? They're going out there with guns, pitchforks. Right? I imagine they're doing the old Nicky 9 door where they're not really sleeping. They're just waiting. Right? Kick open the door, like
gotcha, fucker.
And then there's no one.
Well, and a lot of times too, like, so I know we're going to mention this person in a bit, and I feel like it's important maybe to bring it up now. The fact that they actually, like, they lived very rurally. They didn't really it was very far away from the city centers. Like a lot of the reasons we're going to get into it, like, they had a lot of people come travel to experience whatever we're going to talk about, and they had to stay overnight because they had to travel to this place.
Yeah.
But they did have one neighbor, and the neighbor's name was Kate Batts. Okay. And unfortunately,
A great Spooktober name.
for Kate Patz, her family owned probably the nearest, farm to the Bells. And her husband, who was the primary, worker of the farm, ended up having an accident where he was following a tree and it fell backwards on him, broke both his legs and rendered both his legs useless. So they fell in really hard times. So I guess Kate kind of brokered this deal with John Bell because they're on hard times. They can't really afford to work their lands. And they're like, listen, we're desperate. Is there anything you can do to help us out? So John in turn offered them one of his volunteers and a cash loan for a parcel of her unused land. Okay. But unfortunately, when they made this deal, John didn't really state the interest rate at what the loan was going to be paid back at. Okay. So later it was revealed when she had to make her first payment that this interest rate was fucking ridiculous. And there's no way she was going to ever be able to afford it. So she felt extremely slighted by John.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the rest of this later. But initially, when all these weird things started happening around the farm, the family initially thought that this was maybe, Kate Batts and her, her volunteers or whoever kind of being sent to the farm to fuck around and to scare them and just to cause mischief, right?
Because they owed money.
Well, they fucked him over, right? They slighted him. And she was a very vocal person in the community, basically saying like, calling John Bell a user and, he covets her land and he's a snake. So right away, like they didn't really go too crazy because they started hearing all these noises, but there was already this public beef and they kind of, they were like, okay, it's maybe not that big of a deal because it's probably these guys just trying to scare us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the activity within the house, the paranormal activity started to kind of crescendo, or at least to get to a point where it kind of, it not only was it outside the house, but it was inside the house as well.
Yeah, it like I said, it's creeping in, and that like it's everything. When you read this, it does seem like a slow build, and this will get to one of my theories later on. But it's on the edge of the property, it's being seen, then it's manifesting in things that can be seen by John, like these dogs and whatnot. Then it's clawing at the outside of the house. And now it's like escalating where it's like, now it's inside. They're hearing scratching in the walls, on the bedpost. They think it's rats, right? They don't know what the fuck's going on.
The one thing that we really got to touch on here that fucking made my skin crawl was it wasn't necessarily scratching on the bedpost, but gnawing.
Yeah.
They heard gnawing on the fucking bedposts.
Yeah.
Could you imagine trying to sleep through that?
Yeah, originally they thought it was rats. And so they like tore apart the house apparently looking for rats, trying to find anything, but they couldn't find any animals or pests or anything that would possibly be capable of producing the kind of sounds that they were hearing. And the spirit, as it kind of became known, increased its activity. And so to the point where it was actually seemingly physically abusing some members of the family. Apparently, Joel and Richard Williams, and especially Betsy, were the ones who got it kind of the worst, of experiencing things like being, feeling like they were being physically struck or pinched or having their hair pulled by this strange poltergeist entity of some type.
Yeah. It's and they were like, when they weren't in rooms, they were hearing like beds slide apart, and it's seemingly getting to the point where it's almost nonstop. They're even starting at this point, they're hearing low sounds of like almost like faint like you're hearing someone whisper from another room, but you can't tell what they're saying. And some people, they were reporting that like I think I hear something, but they weren't sure. Like it's really starting to escalate in the house.
And so there were attempts at communicating with this entity, the family, trying to at least call out to it, trying to identify it, to ask it what it wants, like, why is it here? These things. And it's said that Lucy Bell and John Jr. were actually left relatively unharmed by this witch. And I think there's some evidence or some reports telling that the entity somehow communicated with them that Lucy Bell was like untouchable, that she was a good person and they couldn't mess with her essentially. But another thing that was communicated by this entity is that apparently it claimed that she wouldn't leave the Bell family alone until John Bell, the patriarch of the family, was dead. And also that Betsy would have to break off her relationship with a young man named Joshua Gardner, who they had pretty much like started an engagement just prior to the events that started happening on the farm.
So like they would hear these whispers would slowly build where they could hear, they're like, it sounds like someone's talking into the room, and then they weren't sure what it was. And then it would build to where it was like saying like, John Bell is a bad man. He must die, right? Like, I'm going to kill him. Like, and like, honestly, at what point, Andrew, do you move out of your house at that? Like, on this escalating serious event?
Boys, I heard non, I'm the fuck out of there. You had me at non. See you later, bye. But, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the second I hear a whisper on the wind, I'm calling Ed and Lorraine Warren or whoever's.
Hey, fuck, I'm calling Ghostbusters, dude.
Yeah, everyone.
So right around this point, things are starting to kind of ramp up. And for the most part, the Bell family, especially John, has been like, listen, I don't want anybody knowing about this. We're going to keep this silent. This is our business. We're going to sort it out, which makes sense because, you don't want people thinking that you guys are crazy. He's a prominent businessman. He's a leader within the church community. But at this point, they're kind of getting to their breaking point. So, at this point, Betsy's getting harassed nightly. She's getting slapped in the face. She's getting choked. She's getting smothered. We got family members getting
She's getting scratched and shit.
Family members are getting blankets removed from them while they're trying to sleep. Like things are getting crazy. So, at what point Betsy actually tries to sleep over at a friend's house and ends up having an encounter at a friend's house.
Yes.
Okay?
That's fucking terrifying.
So it follows her to her friend's house. Then the family's like, holy shit, okay, so there's no escaping this. So they decide to bring outsiders into the house to see if they can witness this. They bring over some trusted neighbors who are friends. The encounter happens in front of the neighbors. So then it kind of starts spreading amongst this kind of smaller community, right? And everybody starts catching on. And then like one story that I absolutely love is one neighbor named Frank Miles, which fucking badass name already. Like, this guy's going to be a badass, who is reported to be a rather large and stout fellow, wanted to help. He came to the Bell house with full intention of volunteering to crush the witch with his powerful grip. As he spent...
he's just like, no, he's like,
squeeze the life out of it.
Yeah.
Ooh. As he spent the night at the Bell home, waiting for the opportunity to give the ghost the thrashing it deserved, the sheets were yanked off of him. He quickly learned that he was no match for the strength of the spirit that struck him in the face and on the head. Later, he claimed they were some of the most powerful blows he'd had ever taken.
And like, let's just go back to like Betsy. Do you remember what it said to her? It said something like, you can't get away from me. You can't get away from me. I'm going to follow you. I will follow you wherever you go. And
I think it's important to note too, at the beginning and then these initial encounters that they're having, the witch's initial like victim was Betsy. Everything was focused on Betsy. And it wasn't until a little later that it focused more so on John Bell. Initially, it was all Betsy.
And it, like we said, it began following her around to the point where her and her fiance at the time, Joshua Gardner, were unable to spend time together or go anywhere without being followed by these like vocal taunts, voices and stuff from the entity actually following them everywhere that they went. And it became so bad that on Easter Monday of 1821, Betsy met with Joshua at the river near their home and had called off the engagement.
And I think it's important to note the fact that the ghost explicitly says, like, you are not to marry Joshua Green or Gardner. You're not to marry him. Like the ghost is actually, or the witch is actually just you mentioning him by name. Don't fucking marry him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because it made me kind of think that when you first read this, one of the things I kind of thought was that perhaps this is someone practicing witchcraft, but someone like another suitor of Joshua Gardner, of someone who like was really infatuated with him and was jealous of Betsy, right? And so
potentially,
and then starts to go after the family, and
or maybe somebody that's infatuated with Betsy.
I thought that, but then the thing with the reason because it initially goes after Betsy and it's kind of like not deterred. And then it starts to go after the dad and John Bell. And I thought maybe it started to go after John Bell because it was like, if I can scare the father to leave, the whole family will go. Right? Like if I can convince him, scare him enough, threaten him that they will leave entirely.
Potentially.
Right? That's what I was kind of thinking. But that is a good point. Maybe it was someone infatuated with Betsy too. But then I just don't understand those motives to then go after John. Right?
Well,
it probably wouldn't have been more about going after John. It would just been getting them apart somehow, like getting them
that's what
whatever it takes.
Yeah.
So prior to this, like prior to breaking off the engagement, you still had the activity, the paranormal activity continuing at an unchecked rate. And people were reportedly traveling to the home of the Bells to witness this. Like, I mean, it became like a popular tourist attraction. Everybody was coming to see the Bell Witch.
Yeah, it was the first ever like highway, like, what do you call it? Like tourist trap.
Yeah.
Right. Come on down to see the Bell Witch in action.
Yeah. And they were requesting that people would show up and ask to stay the night to somehow to see the activity of this entity that was torturing the Bells.
And the crazy thing is the entity was fucking delivering.
Yeah. There's a lot of, there were a lot of stories apparently from people like coming and encountering this paranormal activity, things that are happening. Again, we said, we mentioned the Frank Miles encounter. But one of the most popular stories of one of the most probably prominent visitors is that there is legend told that Andrew Jackson, former president of but prior to his presidency, I believe, came to visit the Bells himself. Jackson was actually a major general in 1819, and he actually visited the Bell family home after hearing stories from the elder Bell sons who served with him about this would be John Jr., Drury, and Jesse, who all served under Jackson's command during the Battle of New Orleans in 1815. And he had heard stories about the activity that was going on. So he decided to take a couple of his men and go and visit the Bells and see this fantastic performance for himself.
Well, they were not only going to witness the ghost, but he thought that maybe some of his men might be able to help, because one of the men that traveled with him was a self-proclaimed witch hunter. And he was, allegedly bragging to the men, like, we have nothing to fear because I have silver bullets. And if that witch even shows herself, I'll put her down.
And Helsing himself.
Like I've done to many witches before. And I am eager to do it again with my silver bullets.
To be fair, back then, witches were just fucking normal women that were probably shot with normal bullets. So yes. Yes. Horrible.
Yes. Let's just say there's a couple of characters that we'll have to talk about in this story who they were like, should we kill her just in case? Because after a while, they were just like, should we burn all the women? Would that help? One of them's a witch. But so he traveled with people that were thinking that they could maybe help out this situation. And they didn't even make it to, the property. They just had the intent to go to the property when they started, getting some of the effects of the witch.
Paranormally activated.
So once they actually arrived at the property, at the very edge of the property, apparently, the company of men that were with Jackson, their horses suddenly stopped and apparently couldn't be urged any farther. They couldn't push them. They couldn't get them to move. The horses were hesitant to move any further.
Some of the reports I read too is like the wheels were inexplicably like locked, like as if they were like brakes all of a sudden on these wooden wagons.
And I mean, I heard they went to like horrid lengths to get these horses to move too.
Yeah.
Like obscene fucking animal abuse to try and motivate these horses to move, and they would not move.
And Jackson is said to have proclaimed something along the lines of, "By the eternal boys, that must be the Bell Witch." And then immediately following this, apparently there was a unknown female voice that called out to the men and gave them permission to continue on and proceed to the house, but that she would visit with them later. And then with this, the horses, unbidden, like after all of this thing, they just started going forward towards the Bell cabin.
Now that the witch hunter we started talking about, takes it upon because everyone's looking at him, right? They're like, oh, what you're the witch guy, right? You're the witch tamer.
I wonder if this witch hunter's last name's Miles too. He's coming to avenge his brother.
Yeah. Well, he starts
Miles. He took on my brother Frank.
He starts like taunting the witch, like and boasting like he's gonna kill her, and I got a silver bullet, and show yourself, and you're dead, witch. You're done for. And immediately, just without warning, he just starts convulsing. He's shaking, he's being beaten, is struggling, like flipping around, and is basically left in a pool of his own like mess.
Yes, and then he's also apparently picked up and then sent flying headfirst out the door as if somebody had picked him up like Moe style and just chucked him out the door.
Gave him the old Uncle Phil.
Yeah. Jazzy Jeff.
Yep. Yeah. So, and then the men are reported to have said that they hear the same female voice, which they had heard earlier that day, and threatened that this voice was making threats to expose and or torment another of their band, who was apparently a fraud, is posing as a fraud. And so Jackson's men apparently turned to their general and were begging to leave after witnessing the power of the Bell Witch. But Jackson, the brave major general, I mean, he was also a monster, but insisted on staying so that they could identify this second fraud that the witch was reported to have said. And then that's pretty much where
he's like, oh, I like what he's like, oh, you know what? Let's hear her out.
And so that's pretty much where the legend ends. Now,
well, one of the other like touch on is that like they left very early in the morning, like way before they were supposed to. Like the Bell family kind of got up and they were like, where'd they go? Like, so like there's a couple like differentiating reports of like how soon they left, but by all accounts, after they had seen the witch and had interacted with it, they left in a hurry. That's pretty across the board.
And supposedly after Jackson had taken office, he was quoted in saying, "I saw nothing, but I heard enough to convince me that I would rather fight the British than deal with the torment of what they call the Bell Witch."
He's like, it only took me 5 seconds to realize I never want to go to Tennessee again.
No, thank you.
So up until this point, the ghost has been, I would say, relatively benign. Yes, people have been struck. Yes, people have been, but nobody has been seriously injured. But after this, the ghost encounter gets a little bit deadly.
Yeah, and it's seemingly like the more and more this spirit entity or witch is interacted with, the stronger and the bolder it becomes. But we're going to refill our beers. We'll be right back with more of the Bell Witch.
Yeah, it looks like it.
We're back.
So as we left things up, things are kind of starting to ramp up. And this is where the Bell family decided to maybe try and communicate back with the Bell Witch.
Yeah.
So at some point, they kind of came up with this idea, to determine if maybe they could hear it or not. And they decided to use knocking. So they'd ask questions where numbers were involved, like things like how many persons are present, how many horses are in the barn, how many miles to a certain place. So they asked these questions, and the answer would come in the form of knocks.
Maybe later.
It was at this time that John Bell and the children reported knocks being thrown at them in the evening as they returned from the field. The family also began experiencing the sensation of being slapped. So as of this point, they're actually getting a chance to communicate with the beast. So finally, when they got to the point where the Bell Witch was communicating back with them, they said, "Who are you and what do you want?" And the Bell Witch replied with, "I am a spirit. I was once happy, but have been disturbed."
That's fairly telling.
Next, the witch said, "I am the spirit of a person who is buried in the woods nearby. The grave has been disturbed. My bones have been disinterred and scattered, and one of my teeth is lost under the house, and I am here looking for that tooth." Supposedly, Drury and his friend Corbin Hall had opened an Indian grave and removed a jawbone. In the process, they had dropped a tooth from the jawbone and had slid underneath the floorboard. So
Listen, I'm not going to that crawl space. Fuck that.
Right.
I'd rather move
Right.
than go and find that.
And that's not the only time they spoke with the Bell Witch. Other times the Bell Witch, told them that I am the spirit of an early immigrant who brought a large sum of money and buried my treasure for safekeeping until needed. In the meanwhile, I died without divulging the secret, and I have returned in the spirit for the purpose of making it known the hiding place. And I want Betsy Bell to have the money. So the witch convinced a group of the family members, specified which family members, which I believe it was Drury, it was the Reverend, and that Hall kid, to go out and dig this hole in the property looking for the treasure. And both times, the witch would end up mocking the family members for going out and doing these tasks.
Yeah.
Right? Would fucking have a laugh at them, being like, "Hi, you guys are dummies.
You dumb
You're so
bitch."
gullible. Why would you go do that?" Right? So around this time too, supposedly a detective from Baltimore decided to come into town because he heard about the stories and wanted to debunk the case.
Well, he probably, honestly, big city guy, he's probably thinking that these people are running some sort of grift.
Well, absolutely, right? And when he initially came, he was kind of proven right because the entity fell silent when he tried to communicate with it. And he said, "See, this is all fucking bullshit. This is a fabrication. This is a grift by the Bells." But that night, the investigator felt his body restrained against the house floor. While being held, the entity physically beat the investigator. The guy didn't last the night.
It's interesting. That's such you have someone that comes that's of some importance, and they're like, "All right, let's see this thing," and then nothing. The sheer embarrassment. They're like, "We don't know." Obviously, it's doing that to fuck with them, right? But then to just go ahead and be like, "All right, you don't think I'm real, motherfucker?"
Well, yeah. It's crazy. And then, they've gone as far as they had 3 different reverends come and do exorcisms there with no luck. Supposedly the Bell Witch would kind of subside for a little bit and then ramp up again. But it's interesting because, we already kind of touched on Kate Batts, but I think it's super important to talk about the fact that after she got screwed over by John Bell, she drug his name throughout the fucking city, basically telling everybody that he's a liar, he's a cheat. And like we touched on earlier, he was a high member of the church, right? Well, unfortunately, the church heard what he did and she was able to show proof, and he was actually excommunicated from the church for that.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. And you want to know something else extremely interesting about Kate Batts?
Yeah.
All this started taking place right around, I believe it was 1871 or 1817, either or.
1871.
1871.
Or 1817, sorry. Summer of 1817.
So 1817. Just give you a guess. You know when Kate Bell died? 1817.
Ooh.
Interesting.
Coincidence? I think not, boys. It's got to be her. She's the witch, man. Apparently, she was always that's one thing. She was super eccentric. People around town said she was super weird, super abrasive. She'd always do things like ask to borrow brass pens from other women. And I guess superstitious people believe that if you gave another woman a fucking, not just stitious people, superstitious.
Yeah.
If you gave them a fucking brass pen, they would have control over you.
Interesting.
Right? Weird shit like that. So apparently she was into a little bit of the cult, a little bit witchy. and she had it out for Belle. Yeah.
So supposedly when the banging noises began in the home of the Bells, John Bell Sr.'s health apparently started to decline. It's described in accounts that he started to experience episodes of facial twitching, like he started getting like a twitch in his face, and also experiencing like a paralysis in his mouth, which actually left him with difficulties actually eating or swallowing.
What's that disease where like
Bell's palsy?
Is that what it is? Yeah, that's kind of
but it actually kind of sounds like I don't want to get into it too far, but it sounds like he's suffering from like some neurological deficits.
And so by the fall of 1820, these symptoms would end up leaving him confined to the house. Like he couldn't go anywhere. He was pretty much bedridden. And the entity apparently would just about torture him when he was in his bed. It would said he would like fling his shoes from his feet shoes that he had been wearing. When he would try to walk somewhere, it would slap his face, or he'd begin to experience seizures of some type.
And one of the reports I read too, it was like as he was walking or trying to walk, because he was struggling a little bit, it was like his shoe would be glued to the ground. So it's like as he walked, he'd almost trip out of his shoe because his shoe was like instantly cemented in place, and he would just kind of like bail out of his shoe.
Sounds like he's having some type of gait abnormality, which get back to the neurological deficits as well.
So by December 20th of that year, 1820, John Bell Sr. actually died after slipping into a coma.
The first victim or known victim of the Bell Witch.
And so now following his death, like immediately after his death, there was a strange, what the family said, that they found a strange vial of some type of dark, unidentified liquid that was in the cupboard of the family home. It's in the cupboard, and some people say that some other versions of the legend say that it was on his dresser or near the bed, on the nightstand somewhere. But some type of unidentified liquid is a constant theme through most of these. And then the family didn't know what it was or where it came from because none of them were able to identify it. So John Jr., clever guy that he is, decided to give some to the family cat.
Be a fucking asshole.
Who immediately laid down and died, as most of the versions of the legend agree that the cat would pretty much instantly die.
I really wish this story went John Jr. then exploded into flames immediately after for doing that.
Well, John Jr. didn't explode into flames, but after they had seen the cat die, apparently they
sacrificed the family cat. He's another volunteer.
Well, they took the vial and flung it into the fireplace, which produced a type of bluish flame. And also that when they did this, they were said to have heard a joyful voice exclaiming, "I gave old Jack a big dose of that last night, which fixed him."
Yeah.
So John Bell's funeral, interesting little...
You have the witch claiming that she poisoned John with this.
Admitting somehow that she poisoned John with this vial of poisonous liquid. Now, John Bell's funeral, like we said, he was an influential and a pretty big name in the town. His funeral was actually one of the largest ever held in Robertson County, Tennessee, up to that time. And it's said that as his family and friends actually left the graveyard, the entity, the voice that the entity had was heard laughing and singing a song reportedly about brandy of some type.
Brandy, you're a fine girl.
Yes.
What a good wife you would be. But my life, my love, and my lady is the sea. Brandy used to watch his eyes when he told his sailor story. She could feel the ocean fall and rise. She saw its raging glory, for he had always told the truth. Lord, he was an honest man, and Brandy does her best to understand. at night. But and then
Little
just
soft rock for you.
that on repeat.
Yeah, pretty well. Yeah, it was pretty much that they were. It was heard that the singing did not stop until the last person had left the gravesite.
Yeah, he was like, I'd like to talk about John. Brandy is Ron girl. Like, all right, this is it. It does it ties into another story, another theory of mine that this was a time traveler going back in time, fucking with people, right? Singing a song about Brandy. They're like, he kept saying Brandy.
Shit,
right?
that guy would be.
Kept singing about Brandy. We don't know.
So a year after this, or at least the next year after John Sr.'s death, apparently the entity was reported to have spoke to the widow Lucy Bell, saying that it was leaving, that it was going to leave them, but it would return for a visit in 7 years. And true to its word, in 1828, the entity apparently did return. Now, most of the activity is said to have centered around John Bell Jr., who said that they had a discussion with the entity that apparently topics along the lines of the origin of life, Christianity, and the need for a
Why did you kill our fucking dad?
Yeah, that, and also the need for a mass spiritual awakening. Those were the topics, I guess, that they were discussed.
So it's a Christian murderous ghost. Is what
something like that, I guess.
It doesn't necessarily say that the entity was like bringing up these things about Christianity, origin, life, but those were the topics. So maybe this is kind of where my brain went with this, is that I started to think that if you look at a lot of these similarities and take out the witch, a lot of these, like the clawing, the shit like that, other than the actual talking, a lot of this you could be like, it kind of parallels some UFO encounters. So part of me wondered that, when it goes like, we will be leaving and I will be leaving and I will return at this time period. It's like, it's leaving and it's just jumping to 1828. So maybe for this entity, it's like, like a second, and now it's back. It is just checking in, like we say with these abductee experiences where they're going and they're seeing this entity, 15, 25, 40, 50, like maybe for this UFO or alien species that they can just traverse time and space, that this is just 20-minute checks, and the whole thing for them takes an hour and a half. I kind of looked at this as something like that, and it was just, now it's just picking his brain kind of thing about like what they believe, but it doesn't really, tie into like why they were so cruel.
Interesting enough too, they said that on their journey, on their pilgrimage from North Carolina to Tennessee, they did actually, their diaries describe seeing the Brown Mountain Lights.
Yeah.
Which is a fucking supposed UFO phenomenon.
Right. We talked about them on a confidential, I think. We talked
on
about
a confidential, yeah.
Yeah. So, and they were like, they've definitely witnessed seeing these. I wonder if they saw some that followed them.
So perhaps. Now, like we said, this is considered, the legend of the Bell Witch is considered to be one of the, it usually earns the title, the most documented hauntings in American history. Now, this would not have been possible without one Martin V. Ingram, who, if we didn't have his notes and he hadn't published an actual book about the haunting, we might have never heard about this, except for a couple maybe blurbs and local newspapers or things like this that probably never would have really reached the public at large. So Martin V. Ingram, his story is a little bit interesting as well. So apparently during the Civil War, he served as the Confederacy as a member of the Nashville Battalion. And then he received an injury at the Battle of Shiloh, which resulted in his discharge. So in 1866, he started to begin a career in editing and publishing. And then he kind of got into the newspaper industry and stayed in there until 1881. So but after that, sometime between 1890 and 1892, Ingram is said to have traveled to Adams Station, which was originally the community known as Red River and Cedar Hill in Tennessee. So Red River being the community of the Bells. So he went there. He had heard about this story, and then it's said that he stated that his reason for going there was for the purpose of viewing the grounds where, quote, where historic and most intensely thrilling events were enacted 75 years ago. And he would go ahead and begin an entire investigation into the Bell Witch. And he would interview individuals who were living there and familiar with the phenomenon that had occurred there 75 years prior. Now, it's said that Ingram would write several reports about the Bell Witch. He published these over several days in July of 1892 in the local newspaper, which is known as the Clarksville Leaf Chronicle. And so he would take these reports. He would take these reports and he would eventually publish them all together in one larger work, which held the title An Authenticated History of the Famous Bell Witch, the Wonder of the 19th Century and Unexplained Phenomenon of the Christian Era, the Mysterious Talking Goblin that terrorized the West End of Robertson County, Tennessee, tormenting John Bell to his death, the story of Betsy Bell, her lover, and the haunting Sphinx. That was the full title of the book.
Yeah.
Nice run-on sentence there.
Yeah.
No, there's periods in there.
There's periods and commas.
It's not the way you read it.
Yeah. It's, he just couldn't, he just like, he was trying to get all the buzzwords.
Get everything. Trying to trip the
all the
algorithm.
It works for TikTok.
Yeah. He was ahead of his time, right? He's like, I want to hit all the later in life when there's hashtags, I want to hit them all.
Wow, he should have put fucking Illuminati in there.
Yeah.
Would have been way more rich.
Yeah. Freemason.
Yeah.
And so eventually it would be truncated. It'd be shortened down. And usually people refer to the book that's written as An Authenticated History of the Famous Bell Witch. And so in the introduction to this book, apparently he included a letter from James Allen Bell, who was a grandson of John Bell Sr. And the letter explained that John Bell's son had decided that none of the family papers, documents and documentation of this, of the occurrence of the Bell Witch and their encounter with the Bell Witch would be released until all of the immediate family members who had been involved in the event were dead. So all of the original family would be dead, except for, and then they couldn't release it until every one of them had died, until they were gone. But Ingram's introduction also spoke about a family, a collection of family notes and a diary that was given to him by James Allen Bell. And this one had actually been written by Richard Williams Bell when he was 35 years old in 1846, 20 some years after the events. And now Richard had actually been 6 and 10 years old during the entire event, when it started 6 and then for the years that it followed. And I think he was about, and then that would make him 17 when it came back, its final appearance ish in 1828. Now, Martin is the only one who has seen these things. Like Ingram was said to have been the only one who had seen nobody else saw these notes, and he was the only one who had seen them. And so it's a little bit, some people kind of say that cast doubt on whether, this was either something that Martin had Ingram had actually maybe fabricated or embellished to some extent. Now, some people contend
a lot of. Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, because a lot of that has to do with the fact that even just how it's written. They're like, this is supposed to be the diary, a personal diary of potentially like a guy who's a farmer, and then you go and you look into the vocabulary and stuff like that, and it's like looks like it's written by someone who, is well learned in literature and shit like that, right?
Yeah. So there's some
it's far too eloquent.
There is some contention as to whether perhaps Ingram had manifested this story, or he just kind of went on to write it and got it just to get it published, or just something, along the lines of just making up a spooky ghost story. But there are those who go ahead and cite their actual articles that popped up in local newspapers around the area that cited that are reported on fantastic events in the area of Red River that all sound very similar to the events connected with or attributed to the Bell Witch. So it's not there are some people who say that no, he didn't make these up, but he did collect it. Whether he embellished some of this stuff or not, that's still probably up for debate. But this very much, a lot of people would cite those newspaper articles that popped up during the same time that the Bell family was experiencing this paranormal activity, and they would say that this is proof, or this is at least corroboration that something happened here. He wasn't just making all of it up. It wasn't totally it's not an incomplete fabrication at this. So some of the more famous parts of the Bell Witch phenomenon is that a lot of people, you could search this place up because there is the famous Bell Witch cave. Now that's the last, the house and everything, all that's gone, long destroyed, but the cave, the legendary cave, still exists. You can go there. So some people say that, or legend says that perhaps the cave was the last place that the spirit or entity retreated to after it left the Bell family, that this was the final place for it to go. There's some stories apparently that even prior to the events of 1817 that the Bell children had perhaps even encountered the entity in that cave before everything started kind of going wild. And so this cave, apparently it's about it's about 490 feet, about 150 meters long, and you can go in there. There's
thanks.
There's an episode. If you don't want to go in there, you can watch an episode of Ghost Adventures. They went there. And apparently they were the very first paranormal investigatory team allowed to. I don't think they spent the night. They set up some cameras in there. I watched the episode, and they set up some cameras in there. Pretty spooky. Yeah, I don't if you're gonna stay in a poorly lit cave at night. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty spooky. Just right off the bat. It's a pretty good episode. I don't know. They go in there and they do the usual Ghost Adventure things, and it's interesting. But they do what they one interesting thing that they did is they experimented with infrasound. So Zach Baggins, in his experience, subject matter expertise of ghosts.
Bilbo's great nephew.
He is a self-proclaimed channeler and empath / sensitive, whatever you want to call him.
Master tracker.
Ghostographer.
He is pretty sure, and him and his team are pretty sure that there is some type of portal inside the Bell Witch cave, that there's some type of portal, and they're
pretty sure
they brought along one guy who is I don't think he's a regular member of the team. I've watched a lot of fucking Ghost Adventures. And I'm pretty sure that guy's not a regular member of the team, but they brought him in, and his whole idea was to what they were going to do is they're going to experiment with infrasound, that they were going to produce.
That's the sound we can't hear, right?
Right. The very low frequency, vibrational sounds, below most human level of human hearing. And they were going to produce a sound in order to get maybe some type of, his whole theory was that they were going to produce some type of sympathetic vibration that would amplify and or allow some communication or support communication.
Yeah. He was going to break the sound barrier between dimensions.
Yes. That was their theory. They got it. So they set up a big old speaker, and I think the funny thing is they did this whole experiment, right? And so they're all standing there, and they set up these lights, these blinking lights, and they also set up the infrasound thing. And then they all started kind of feeling these strange sensations. They all started feeling stuff. And then they kind of ended up, a couple of them ended up feeling sick. And I was that's infrasound will do that. If you stand there for long enough and you have these low vibrations going through your body, you're gonna end up
my bowels.
You're gonna end up feeling sick because it's just constant drone of that whatever that you can't feel it, but your body can. So I'm but they cited that as proof that they had somehow breached.
They got the Bell Witch there. Yeah.
Yeah. They brought out their little that thing. They brought out whatever the fuck that thing's called. I forget. And it said, apparently they said that it said Indian burial. So, they cited that as proof as
indigenous.
Oh, they said Indian.
Come on, Bilbo, you should know better than that.
That's what they heard.
All right, best part of the fucking case file. Let's hear it, boys. Theories.
So what I think is, if you remember Lep Castle, there was one spirit there called the elemental. And the elemental was said to only gain power and kind of provoke after being like recognized or like interacted with. It seemingly would amp up. And I kind of wondered if this was something that was there. And the more, it was kind of like the perfect storm because it was a spirit that lived in there, you know, whether an elemental by the druids or whoever summoned this thing or created it for whatever reason years and years ago. Before this happened, it was, you know, didn't have a lot of power, not a lot of interaction, but it started with the whispers in the trees. And then as, you know, some of John Bell's volunteers were noticing it, interacting with those whispers, hello, right? It was kind of feeding upon that and feeding on the fear kind of growing in power. And then it was
fanning the flames.
Yeah, it was emboldening it. So then you start to see it like start to come in more, right? Like with the ghost lights and stuff. And then you have like the apparitions of these dogs and with the weird heads and stuff. And then it's like as the family's starting to get fear, everyone it's scratching on the houses and doing that kind of stuff. And then it's inside, like it just slowly starts to seem like it grows and grows and grows and grows and grows and grows in power as this goes on until we get to the height where, you know, it seemingly kills John Bell, right? It actually is making vocalizations that they understand. So I kind of thought it was something like that, something like the spirit that was in the Lep Castle, the elemental, where it's like, it's just, as you provoke this thing more, interacted with it, the just more emboldened and powerful it got until it was, you know, it did what it came to do, and that was kill someone. And then once it did that, it kind of retreated. Again, the timing wise, I don't understand that. It's like, well, I'm going to leave. I'm going to peace out. I'm going to dip for 7 years. I can now take my, like a snake. It consumed John Bell. It killed him. And now it's like, peace. I'm going to sleep for 7 years now. Peace out. Maybe. I don't know.
Hibernate.
But that's kind of what I think. Andrew, what were you thinking?
Let's go to Dan.
Dan, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
Ghost.
Ghost?
Ghost.
Just a regular old ghost?
Ghost.
Nothing else? Just ghost.
Just ghost.
All right.
Well
I didn't
thought
see that
out.
I didn't see that on your notes, but I can hop into two. So there's two that kind of stand out. I think they're more the general public's go-tos. The first one was possibly arsenic poisoning. And one of the reasons they jumped to that is the fact that John Bell, before he died, was suffering from what looked to be neurological deficits.
Yeah.
So stroke-like symptoms, right? Which can usually, those type of symptoms are either from like a hemorrhage or a blockage in your brain, or potentially poisoning due to heavy metals. And they can mimic the same symptoms. And one of the interesting facts is that when they gave it to the cat, killed the cat right away. And then when they threw it in the fire, it burned blue, which arsenic does. Right? And it was found in that strange cup. So people speculate that maybe he was being poisoned over a long period of time, possibly 3 months, small little bits here and there. And,
in the soup.
And then he started,
Right.
or whatever, right? So there's that. And then there's another character that we didn't really talk about, which is a pretty fucking shady dude. And he goes by the name of Richard Powell.
I don't like it.
Richard Powell.
Dick Powell.
Dick Powell was Betsy's teacher. Supposedly, although Powell was 11 years older than Betsy, he was madly in love with her and was visibly disappointed when he discovered that she was engaged to marry Joshua Gardner. He was also rumored to have knowledge of the occult, ventriloquism, and horticulture.
Ventriloquism.
Ventriloquism, he's into it.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Like he's there.
So what do we know about the witch? What do we know about the witch? It hated John Bell.
Yeah.
That was the main reason for its manifestation, supposedly. And it also claimed that it was going to follow old Jack, like it claimed it was going to follow Betsy, but it never did follow Jack. It only followed Betsy. It followed her to the neighbor's house. It followed her when she went to visit her sister. It followed her everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. It never provided a reason why it hated John Bell. And it never provided a reason why Betsy shouldn't marry this guy. Not once.
No.
The spirit knew all the secrets of the communities because it was known to go around and share gossip. It would share shit like the daily sermon, who wasn't at church and whatnot. And one of the main figureheads of the community at the time was the teacher and who would be privy to all the information. Right. So it was well known that Powell had interests in Betsy beyond, classroom stuff. And he would frequently visit her at her home to talk about school and her accomplishments and stuff like that. And apparently John Bell despised it. And he knew that this guy was interested in his 12-year-old daughter. And he's like, at the fact that this man is 26 years old, he's way too old for my daughter. And it will
was
be
he
over
11? Was it 11-year age gap that big then? Because I feel like they were marrying pretty young.
Well, we can touch on that after this. But basically, John Bell was noted saying, over my dead body, will you marry my daughter?
Interesting.
Okay. So that right there gives you a reason to want John Bell dead.
I just feel like, and I mean,
there's other reasons too. Like Dick Powell, he was usually coming around to check on the family, see if everything's okay. The family, everybody's visiting the family to see these manifestations, to bear witness to it. You know who was never there during one of these events?
Dick Powell.
Dick Powell.
Well, but how would the ventriloquism work then? Because basically when you say ventriloquism.
Well, I'm saying that's what he had knowledge in. Maybe the fact that he's hiding this whole time. He's the one that's doing the voices from another room, right? Mm-hmm. They don't know where he is. Like
he's hiding in the rafters or something, maybe. Right? But maybe. I just feel like if he was ever there and you have someone, he's just sitting like this, he's like,
it's just weird
that I think ventriloquism in the sense that he knew how to throw his voice, like he knew how to. Oh, maybe. He didn't have to be,
but mimic other voices.
Well, maybe with the witchcraft and stuff, he could do that from a distance, right?
Well, yeah, and the fact that why else would this fucking witch not want her to marry this random Joshua Gardner dude? And then all of a sudden, your main focus is Betsy. And then the dad says, well, over my dead body is this guy going to marry my daughter. And now, fucking John Bell's the number one victim. Yeah. And then you want to fucking put the nail in the coffin? What happens when John Bell dies? She breaks off her engagement to Gardner. Who does she end up marrying?
Dick Powell.
Dick Powell.
Buddy, this is a love story. We should have been talking about this in February. It's a Valentine's Day episode.
Well, I don't know. And then there's the other fucking horrid people kind of speculate that maybe Betsy suffered from dissociative identity disorder because she was experiencing massive childhood trauma due to possibly being molested by John.
Yeah. The Powell one just... I don't know, man. Maybe he was involved in some way, but it's just the ventriloquist thing. I'm like,
he's the only one with motive. He's
true.
The only one for motive. Why else?
But it's so then maybe it's that. Maybe it's this that he was stalking and doing that kind of thing. And really fucking with them. But then it's so that would mean all of the rest of the story just kind of is kind of exaggerated by
it's
Martin Ingram.
Well, exactly. How long after the events was the story told?
I mean, okay.
Right? I think it was sensationalized.
It's plausible, 100%.
I think they generally believed that they were paranormally activated and they shared it. They wrote in their diaries. And I think Ingram took advantage of it and sensationalized it.
Yeah. I mean, his account is the reason why we still know it. So it 100%. Let us know what you think. Is the Bell Witch real? If you go to the cave, are you going to walk into some infrasound portal? Or was it just a jealous lover who was ventriloquisting his way into killing her father?
Into her hearts, boys. He ended up He won.
He won.
He got it.
Yeah. Hey, who says listen, guys, if you're out there, you got a girl, you're trying to, learn ventriloquism, start practicing. Gets you girls. This story proves it. Before we move on, we got some October merch lined up. We got definitely a Spooktober lineup of merch. The first thing we have up, can you guys see this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at this Patreon design that we got. We got the I Believe rocked out edition with the Webb telescope in the back. That's Patreon exclusive. If you want that, that's going to cost you probably $16 because it's at cost to our Patreon members. We've got the I Believe regular. We've got it on a sweater. We've got it on a cup. We got it on a mug. We got the Ouija
keychains.
We got the Ouija
hoodies.
shirt. We've got another design by Ty Halone, who did our whole last month. This one's awesome. The Call of Cthulhu. We've got, the Dare to Say No to Big Candy, the Alien Theorist Monster Mash on a sweater. We got beanies. We got Just Theorize hat this month. And we're going to have a couple.
That's a fucking toque, bud.
Yeah, you like that toque? Look at that.
That's a toque.
Right? That's a fucking toque.
Beanie.
Why? It's for the Americans because they buy more of our stuff.
Fucking toque.
So yeah, we got tons of stuff coming up. Now let's get back to, if you want to support us on Patreon, you get that. And also you get a whole bunch of other stuff like hours and hours of our bonus content. Is it playing?
Nope, not for us. Maybe for somebody else.
Yeah, I know. It's playing Zeltron now. Okay, yeah, perfect. I got it. Got it first try. This month's Patreon supporters, absolute beauties. We have Kyle, Azayata. Definitely blew that. We got G Baller 22. We've got Tactical Platius. Street Kid named Zyre. And that's all this week for Patreon supporters. You want to be a Patreon supporter? Patreon.com/Alien Theorist Podcast. And oh shit. How do
what?
We fucked up.
How do we fuck up?
Music. No, I killed the music. I think the music's dead. Is the music dead? Music's dead now.
Never heard it.
Okay, well you didn't, but the stream would.
Okay.
Theory of the week, baby. Theory of the week. Last week we asked if you would be so kind as to go give our new show Sports Conspirator a listen and even shoot us a 5-star review. And we had 6 absolute beauties go out and do just that. They wrote us lovely 5-star reviews, very thoughtful, each one of them. So we have Josh Attempt Art, that's Black Ground Pond, Jesse Ray 95, Ben as Billy Bob 123455. We got Maddie 122356938, and we got GeForce 951. All of them left us 5-star reviews, so all of you are 1/6 Theory of the week. Enjoy it. And as we always say at the end of these things, keep those eyes on the skies.